All right, here we go. Chapter 14. Let's knock this one out. Police and the juvenile. Of course, I'm going to skip through all that. Blah, blah, blah. Summarize the history of juvenile and police relations. So these are a few things, kind of tools that officers have that they can use when dealing with juveniles and adults, to be honest, but more specifically with juveniles. A lot of times an officer is going to warn and release a juvenile as opposed to taking them into custody. So they can just warn and release. They can detain them, take them into custody. They can cite them, which is basically giving them a notice to appear in court, but they're not taking them to juvenile hall. They're just telling them that you're going to be charged with a crime, but we're not going to take you into custody. I hate this. Station adjustment makes it sound like they take them to the police station and beat the hell out of them. That's not what this means. It means they kind of take them down to the police station and scare them. Make them think they're going to go through the process and hope that helps keep kids from future delinquent behavior, or they could refer them to a diversion agency like restorative justice, which is something that we've talked about before. So here, these are some options that police officers have. I'm going to kind of sit through that, blah, blah, blah. This one I think is really interesting. Early on in the 20th century, police women were hired to deal specifically with juveniles because people thought that women were better at dealing with juveniles than men. So, as you can imagine, they were looking for the more motherly type of person to deal with juvenile offenders at that time. Things have changed pretty significantly since that time, but now we do have officers within most police agencies that typically deal with juveniles. And I use the campus officers as the example, the SROs that we've talked about a little bit this semester. But the SROs are officers who have additional training and honestly, probation and police, we would go through, I think it was a week-long training every summer where we would learn how to deal with adolescents and how their brains were different and that kind of stuff. So you do have officers that do have more experience and training dealing with juveniles. Problem-oriented policing is another type of policing method where you are policing in order to address a problem. So if you live in a community where juvenile crime is a problem, then you're probably going to have more officers that are trained in dealing with juveniles. Now, any police officer can deal with a juvenile. But I showed you for the discussion question, we had that video of the police officer dealing with the kid across the street from Hoover who was jaywalking. And I'm not going to state an opinion one way or the other, but I will tell you that officer was not a juvenile officer. He's not one of the officers that had been trained with the campus police officers. Would that have made a difference in the way the whole scenario went down? I don't know. But anyways, cycle of alienation. And some of you, and I love to read your thoughts and your opinions. We were talking about the campus officers, and I asked you if you thought that campus officers should be on campus or should we just remove them. And it's really interesting because your perspectives are very different. And again, I think that's a good thing, but some of you were of the belief that the police officers being on campus were a negative thing because they would further, label certain youth, which it totally makes sense. I was fortunate. I worked with two fabulous officers. I had two separate SROs at Hoover, and both of them were amazing with the youth. But is every officer like that? Yeah, of course not. So, kind of depends. Juvenile officers, there are a lot of different reasons that a police officer might use discretion. I'm kind of skipping here because I don't remember what the next slide says. But discretion means that the officer has the ability to choose from a number of different tools in order to deal with a situation. Police officers don't have to arrest every person who commits a crime. The same holds true with juveniles, and I would say in the world of juveniles, the police probably use their discretion more so than they do with adults. And a lot of times they're going to give a juvenile a warning as opposed to taking them into custody. What are some reasons they might not use their discretion or might use their discretion? Maybe the suspect was particularly young. Maybe the nature of the offense wasn't that significant. Maybe the kid was remorseful. Some reasons why an officer might arrest a kid. Number one, for me, attitude test. If the kid acts like a complete jerk and they have violated the law, I have seen this happen, or you can guarantee you're going to go into custody if you are mouthy and disrespectful to the police officer. So that does that push discretion one way or the other? If someone's nice to you, are you going to be nice to them? You know, so I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but does it happen? Yeah, it does. Does race, ethnicity, age, and gender, all of those things have been found to be factors in dealing with discretion. And honestly, as well, the nature of the offense. If it's a murder, then it's pretty unlikely that the officer is not going to arrest them. So also, if officers or if a department is cracking down on a certain type of crime because it's becoming an issue in an area, it might be the policy of the police department to arrest everyone who is found committing a certain type of crime. Complaints from the community. Again, I used to work at Hoover, so every now and then we would start getting a lot of calls from the neighborhood saying, you got kids after school that are smoking weed in front of our house. So after you get a certain number of calls, it's like you kind of got it. You get more pressure to arrest. We already talked about all this stuff. Legal rights of a juvenile, their encounters with police. I love this section because I think it's super interesting. I don't know why the number 3 is there, but whatever. Historically, few or no laws protected juveniles in the 1960s is the time when juveniles started having rights. So prior to the 1960s, they were treated just like adults. Search and seizure. Search and seizure laws for juveniles are exactly the same as they are for adults. Okay, exactly the same as they are for adults. They are juveniles, like adults, are protected from unreasonable search and seizure. Arrest, same process. Process of taking a person into custody is called an arrest. Almost all of their rights during the whole arrest process are the same. Juveniles probably, they have a right to call their parents, and the law enforcement agency is supposed to call their parents as well. Miranda. Okay, you all know what the Miranda rights are. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can or will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney, blah, 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 blah. You know all that stuff. So, can a juvenile waive their right to Miranda and talk to the police? I'm going to pause here for a second. I'm going to ask that question again. I want you to think about it. If you are under 18, can you waive your Miranda rights and make a statement to police? Probably 80% of you right now are saying no, their parent has to be there, and 80% of you would be wrong. Yes, a juvenile can waive their Miranda rights. They can. Now, if a juvenile says, I want to see my parent, that's just like asking for an attorney, and questioning must stop. But if they agree to waive their Miranda rights, it's on, and the questioning's going to continue. Fingerprinting, same thing. Just same as with adults. Pretrial identification processes, same thing. Fingerprinting, photographs, things like that. So none of that is different. Police efforts to deter delinquency. Okay, so a lot of you, when you went to high school, elementary school, middle school, probably did DARE, drug abuse resistance education, Red Ribbon Week, they say no to drugs, all that kind of stuff. So programs like that are still in effect, community-based, school-based, and gang-based. So community-based, you might have police officers go hang out at the Boys and Girls Club. and try and build relationships with the students there. School-based, you know these are campus officers. So these are officers that are SROs and they're on campuses. And then gang-based officers. So you have officers who are that specialize in certain types of gang activity. I'm skipping through that. School-based. Okay, yeah. So this is all kind of the stuff we just talked about. Drug abuse, resistance, McGruff, the crime dog. Specialized gang units, how can they use discretion? Juvenile has early onset of crime and comes to attention the juvenile justice system is more likely to be involved with the juvenile system longer compared to youth that are diverted from the system. We aren't going to evaluate the DARE program. Drug abuse resistance, not assistance. Resistance education. What do you think? Does it work? You all remember being in 3rd grade and drawing, making your little drawing saying, say no to drugs. In 3rd grade, that might have worked. But by the time you got to middle school and high school, yeah, kind of tough. Blah, blah, blah. $200 million a year. What? That's it. Made it through chapter 14.